Hi everyone, it's Don, and I hope you are having a fantastic day. Well, a lot of people were commenting about, when I was mentioning about the food and stuff like that, as, maybe they should have been kicked off the ship. So I decided to compile a list of 10 things that, you know what? These 10 things can actually get you kicked off a cruise ship. So number one, the first thing that can actually get you all kicked off a cruise ship is if you come down with some sick or you're injured and need to be transported to a hospital, or if you're deemed to have an infectious disease that could spread and they don't want you to contaminate the whole ship, they will escort you off the ship and send you to medical care on shore, or even evacuate you into a helicopter and fly you out if it's something really severe. So that is one thing that can get you kicked off a cruise ship. However, it doesn't necessarily, they don't necessarily, sometimes they will put you in quarantine for a little while, and that comes to number two. If they do place you in quarantine and you break quarantine, they tell you to stay in your cabin for a few days, say you contracted a little bit of the norovirus, and they're just precautionary, keeping you in your cabin for a few days just to make sure that you don't spread it to everybody else, and you break that curfew and that quarantine, and you go out to see a show, or you head up to the buffet, or anything along those lines, that is grounds for immediately being removed from the cruise ship as soon as possible, because you've proven to yourself, to the cruise ship, that you can't be trusted to try and keep everybody else from catching what you have. Number three should be an obvious one. Don't bring anything illegal on a cruise ship. That can be anything from drugs, or people have actually tried to smuggle on their pets, trying to smuggle on guns. Things like this are just not permitted on a cruise ship, whether you have a gun permit or it's legal in your country or state to do drugs or marijuana. It's not on cruise ships. You are not allowed to bring anything on cruise ships, because cruise ships travel to different destinations and those laws also have to be upheld. So they just outright ban anything that could be deemed illegal anywhere basically that a cruise ship will travel. So don't try and sneak anything onto a cruise ship that would be deemed illegal. At the best, it'll be confiscated. At the worst, you're losing your cruise. Number four is, don't think that it's cute or sneaky to give your 17-year-old or your 16-year-old or your 18-year-old one of your drinks from your drink package. The drinking age on cruise ships is 21 years of age. In Canada, in some provinces, it's 18 years old. In some other countries, it's even less than that. However, on cruise ships, they stick to the maximum age in most of the world, and some states, and that is 21 years. So that's what they go with, 21 years of age to drink. And if you are caught serving alcohol to a minor, your entire family and yourself could be escorted off the cruise ship. They are very, very strict on this situation. Can you imagine a 16-year-old gets drunk and something happens to them? The cruise lines are going to get sued. This has happened on some cruise ships already, and the cruise ships are now very, very aware of this situation, because that's a huge, huge liability. And so if you're the one caught doing it, there won't be any refunds, there won't be any recourse, you will just lose your cruise. Number five, a lot of people laugh when we say this, failure or refusal to attend a muster drill. In case you're unfamiliar, muster drill is the safety drill that's mandatory, and by law, cruise ships have to have every single passenger attend the safety drill before the ship sets sail. This is the law. They are not doing this for their own good, for their fun of it. This is law, maritime law. You have to do it. And there have been cases where people have refused to do the muster drill. And a lot of people say, no, you're not going to lose your cruise. There was actually a case back in, actually two different cases back in 2012, where a couple was removed because one of the people refused to do the safety drill. Said they weren't feeling well, they're a long day, they're tired, and they've been through the muster drills before. That doesn't matter. I've cruised 100 times, and how many times have I taken a muster drill? 100 times. So there's no excuse for not taking it. It's literally 15-20 minutes out of your entire cruise time. And some people just, oh, it's not, I don't have to do it. It's beyond me. Well, these two couples found out the hard way that no, you can be removed. And quite often you'll hear them calling out the people's names because they haven't shown up in the muster drill, because they're tracking who's there and who's not. And when they call out your name, they'll send people to your stateroom, they'll look for you, and at some point even the captain will come on board and say, if you do not attend the muster drill, you will be removed from the ship. And when he says that, he's not bluffing. So believe him, go to the muster drill, at very least explain your situation. If you are that sick that you cannot go to a muster drill, then maybe that number one thing will come into effect and you'll be removed for being sick on a cruise ship. So that's a no-win situation. But never, never disregard the muster drill, and always go, because you can get removed. And especially since the Costa Concordia ship sinking, they're very, very wareful and mindful of anyone who's trying not to go to the drill. Number 6, a lot of people are very mindful of how much cruises cost, and there's a lot of things on display. There's a lot of stores, there's a lot of $10 sales, and there's the spa area, and there are places that you can shop all over the cruise ships. So this is how they earn some of their revenue. If you are caught stealing, walking out with an item, shoplifting in other words, you will not be allowed just back in your cabin. You will be locked in their little jail in the bottom of the cruise ship, and at the very next port you will be escorted off the ship, and if you're lucky, that's all that will happen to you. Worst case scenario, you will not only be escorted off the ship, but you will be charged with theft, depending on the amount of items or the cost of the item that you're stealing. And trust me, there's a big difference between stealing a stuffed doll on a cruise ship and trying to steal one of their Rolex watches on the cruise ship. They come with much stiffer fines and legal ramifications. So don't try and get away with anything like that, because there's cameras everywhere on a cruise ship. If you think there's cameras in a store, well, triple them on a cruise ship. Number 7 is basically become a nuisance, have disorderly conduct, become abusive, cause trouble anywhere, start arguments, disrupt shows. Basically becoming a nuisance on a cruise ship. You will usually get escorted and be warned, but if it becomes a reoccurrence, you will be removed from the ship. They will kick you off the ship, because your money for your cruise is not worth them having a ton of passengers annoyed at their cruise experience being interrupted because you're being a jerk or an idiot. So if you get too drunk and abusive, throw a punch at somebody, take a swing, push at somebody, anything like that, become loud and yelling at the shows, become a heckler during a comedy act, you can be removed from your cruise ship. There's one thing about enjoying yourself. There's another thing about enjoying yourself to the detriment of everybody else around you. Just as if you saw one of my videos from my Asian cruise about the lady being drunk on the very first night of the cruise ship. Did not make a very enjoyable experience for all of us around. And luckily, there hasn't been a reoccurrence since then, even though I have seen them in the show. They have not been drunk like they were the first night. So I have a feeling they've been warned. Number 8 is now not just becoming a nuisance someplace, but arguing or becoming abusive to, to members of the staff. Going to guest services, yelling at the guest services there, yelling at your stateroom attendant, being abusive to an officer, somebody checking your ID when you're going in and out of the security lines at the cruise terminals when you're disembarking or embarking. Just basically, they will not tolerate abusive behavior to staff members, and they're right. Let me get this straight. No matter what the situation is, chances are the person you're mad at is not the person you're yelling at. You know, if your cruise shore excursion gets canceled, well, that's not the lady at the front desks in the customer service. She didn't cancel your cruise. Something else happened to make that shore excursion canceled. So don't blame them. You go out on a shore excursion and part of the shore excursion has to get missed. Here's an example. We were supposed to take a gondola up the side of a mountain here in Japan. It was just too windy, so they shut down the operation of the gondola. We still drove up by bus, we still had the views, but they shut the gondola part of it down because it was just too windy. Safety. Safety first, and I appreciate that. Some people, I heard, were upset that they couldn't go up in the gondola. Nobody around me, everyone was very good and very lighthearted, but I did hear some people mention from some staff members that I was talking to that some people did complain that they couldn't go up in the gondola. Now, when I got back to my room, I checked my messages. There's a message there from guest services saying they credit me some amount back on my account because the gondola was canceled. But can you imagine something like that for safety and going down to the front desk services and people were angry at the people at the guest services? It's not their fault. This was the gondola ride that got canceled. Had nothing to do with the crew itself. So quite often, that's a big one. Do not yell, do not scream, and definitely do not touch by pushing or a finger or anything like that any staff member. They don't deserve it, and quite frankly, yes, you should get escorted off the ship if you do something like that. Okay, I have no idea what number I'm at, so I'm thinking this is number 10. I lost count. I feel like the lady on my last shore excursion. So, number 10 is failure to bring the proper travel documents. Myself, I just came to Japan. For Japan, all I need is a passport. But I'm flying from here to China, and I needed a Chinese visa to go there. A lot of people don't check what they need to go on some trips. And so they'll show up at their flight or at their cruise or, once they're landing trying to get off, and they don't have the travel visa. They don't have the proper documentation. They don't bring their passport with them when they need a passport to go on. They just think their driver's license is good enough. That's not the case. And in some countries, you need to get vaccinated depending on where you're going. You need to show proof that you've been vaccinated as well, and you need all that documentation with you. If you don't have it, you can first of all be refused to be boarded. If they discover it on the way in the cruise, so say the cruise goes on like a long trip like mine. So perhaps this here cruise is 16 days. What happens if it was a 20-day cruise and it carried on into China? Well, once we hit Japan, and now they are checking all the documentation for the visas and everything to go into China, if you don't have your documentation, they will leave you in Japan because they can't continue on with the cruise with somebody with improper documentation. The cruise lines will often try and, expedite a quick visa and get things, but if they can't, that's on you for not having the proper documentation, and you will not be allowed to go. And check your passport dates as well. if your passport expires 6 months prior to the last day of your cruise. So if your last day of your cruise is say January 1st, if your passport expires in March, that's not a 6-month period. They can refuse to let you go on the cruise because your travel documents are supposed to have at least 6 months validity left before you travel. So that's another thing. Improper documentation is a big one. Always check the regulations. So many people ask me, can I just travel with my driver's license? Can I just do this? Can I just do this? And in some cases, yes, you can. But I always say, get a passport. It's like $120 for 5 years. How many things can you buy nowadays that last 5 to 10 years and are only $100? Get yourself a passport because it's the safest way to travel, to have documentation if anything ever happens. So it's worth the investment. Even if you're only going to travel once every 3 years, well, that's 2 uses for that passport that might come in very, very handy. So there you go. Those are 10 things that can actually get you kicked off a cruise ship, and a lot of them is self-inflicted, if you will. Stealing, being abusive, not bringing the proper documentation, refusing to go to the muster drill. A lot of these aren't necessarily anything to do with the cruise line or situations. Most of it is self-inflicted exile from the cruise ship. Well, I hope you liked this update. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Want to see more tips, more tricks, more travel blogs from around the world? Hit that subscribe button. Until next time, have yourself a safe and a great vacation.